And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Remember a couple years ago when our conservative friends were gleeful at the opportunity to be drinking their coffee from mugs labeled liberal tears? Remember that? Oh, you remember how fun and how energized they were and how much they loved doing that? Yeah, not so much today, because look, this is what helping the working class looks like, and I know they're trying to divide. They are, in fact, the House Judiciary Committee, the Republican side of the House, tweeted out today, "If you take out a loan, you pay it back. Period." And that seems to be the line that a lot of folks have bought into, because I started thinking about it. You take out a loan, you pay it back, period, unless you're Donald Trump. Yeah, unless you're a giant corporation, you file bankruptcy. Unless you're Marjorie Taylor Greene, who good on the White House for finally pushing back, tweeting out some reality, some fact. She was out there, screaming about how, government just saying, okay, your debt is completely, forgiven. It's unfair. It's unfair. Yet we find out that Marjorie Three Names has $183,504 in outstanding PPP loans that were forgiven. No, she's crazy about 10 grand going to people without Pell Grants and 20,000 with people with Pell Grants. Crazy about that. But she pocketed $183,504. No problem. Pennsylvania Congressman Mike Kelly, he tweeted out asking plumbers and carpenters to pay off loans of Wall Street advisors and lawyers isn't just unfair, it's also bad policy. Yet Congressman Kelly, he pocketed almost $1 million in PPP loans that were forgiven, not paid back. Matt Gaetz, the embattled, rapey forehead is what they're calling him on Twitter. He put out, everyone knows that in a $60 billion European land war, it's always the last $3 billion that kicks in the door. He's going after the Biden administration for supporting Ukraine. They pointed out that Congressman Gaetz, somehow he got $482,321 in PP loans forgiven. And it's interesting that the loudest voices seem to be the folks who've been lining their pockets. A number of people in Congress that voted against helping working people on so many other pieces of legislation, they've lined their pockets. Mark Wayne Mullen, who's running for Senate out in Oklahoma, almost $1 million in forgiven loans. But hey, don't think about this. And this is one of these moments, one of these interesting moments where you got to go back and look at how college used to be. And the folks over at Time Magazine, they went and they looked at a couple of things. Mitch McConnell, for instance. When Mitch McConnell went to college back at the University of Louisville back in 1964, his tuition cost him a whopping $330 a year, about $2,500 in today's dollars. When you look at what the University of Louisville charges today, over $12,000, there's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. So you could work and go through college and you could pay it off. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, he called this a massive debt transfer scam. But when he went to Cal State, Bakersfield, graduated back in '89, tuition was less than $800. Today it's over $7,500, a 400% increase in the amount of tuition. And again, we're doing nothing to correct this. And I'll get to the point here in a couple of minutes. You had the moderate Democrat, Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. She came out, disagreed with the policy, against it, because it doesn't address the real problems. And I agree. This is about helping working class people. She went to the University of Nevada back in '86, about my age. She paid less than $1,000 for tuition. Today, it's about 3 times that. It's crazy. Now, you had Chuck Grassley, who went to school back in the 50s. So completely different world. Paid about But $159 a year today to go to the University of Northern Iowa, $8,300, but nearly a 500% increase when you adjust for inflation. So, you go, but hey, but here's the reality. What's happened is states and the tax base has walked away from funding education. You look at Colorado, from 1980, Reagan era forward, Colorado has cut their higher education budget by 70%. South Carolina, more than 66% over that time. Arizona, 62% over that period of time. Michigan, over half. This is one of those moments. My state of Pennsylvania, back in the 80s, the tax base picked up 2/3 of the cost of tuition. 2/3. Students picked up 1/3. Today, that number is completely backwards, where students are picking up 3/4 of the cost of tuition. And how did that happen? Well, we've had a massive redistribution of wealth in this country. Massive redistribution of wealth. From working people to the wealth class. We have created the largest working wealth class in the history of civilization. And it comes back to our tax code. Reagan forward. When Reagan took office, the top marginal tax rate was 70%. The corporate tax rate were in the high 40s, low 50s. You go back to the 1950s, the top marginal tax rate in this country was 92%. The corporate tax rate was over 50%. And then you go Reagan era forward. We've been on this tax cut fetish to where we've said, hey, we got to give wealthy people all the money because they're smart and they know what to do with it. And you know what we didn't do? We stopped investing in higher education. We stopped investing in community hospitals. We stopped investing in this country. There's something seriously wrong with this. And we can undo this, but it's going to take time and it's going to take policy. Bad policy got us into this mess. Smart policy hopefully going to get us out. So I want to get your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425 is the number if you've got thoughts, questions, comments on this. Let's bang through it. I got Tim in Illinois on line 1. Tim, how are we doing today?
Hey, Rick, how you doing? I just wanted to call in to say I am a conservative Republican in every way, shape, and form you could think of that term. But I think that what the Republicans have to do is to stop complaining about everything the Democrats do. This is only $10,000, right? It's not. We're not paying off a $172,000 loan from somebody who went to a school that they shouldn't have got, that they couldn't afford, right?
Correct.
I mean, my wife and I paid off our daughter's private school loans because they weren't really government backed. So, we did what we're supposed to do. And I don't really have a big problem with this. The other thing is that you also have to put on your big boy pants when you're talking about politics. And the Democrats they're the best. If they say the Republicans are painting something blue, they're actually painting something blue. If they say the Democrats the Republicans are for the rich, actually the Democrats are for the rich. Every single school that's benefiting from this are basically Democratic Party, production companies. I mean, if you look at the colleges of today, they're pretty much pumping out nothing but progressives. So I mean, it is a wonder, and I kind of you have to give credit where credit is due. The Democrats know how to make sure that they fill their votes with people who they.
No, I wish I agreed with you, Tim. I wish they were that good at what. This is one of those moments where I listen to someone like you make these claims, and I go, man, I wish how you see the world was reality, but it's not. Most of the people I know who've gone to college, they're fairly conservative. They've got this Horatio Alger vision of the world that they've pulled themselves up, and they shouldn't have to pay taxes or do anything for anyone else. So it's interesting to see how you see the world.
Oh, I agree with you 100% because my progressive coworkers, all of them, as soon as they go up the corporate ladder a little bit more, they get money, boom, they go right straight to the gentrified part of Chicago. And they all live in the best and the whitest neighborhoods, and they put their BLM signs in the window. So I mean, I know what hypocrisy is because I am a Republican, and I think that you're completely right with how you opened your show with the hypocrisy of Republicans. I myself am an elected official, and I kind of live my ethos. I mean, I live the life that I portray. You know,
No, and I respect that, Tim. Look,
tax-
and to be honest with you, I wish there were more true, honest conservatives who had values and were able to articulate them. Sadly, we're in this weird world where, we've bought the flag and the T-shirt, and we can't talk to each other anymore. We're in a weird time, I think.
Well,
go ahead.
I try and reach out to shows like this to tell you that there's more of us. There's more people like me than MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, and all those other idiot outlets. They just want to sell. They just want to sell stuff, right? They want us to watch the shows. They want to have hits on the YouTube, but whatever. It's all about money to them. It's not about me and you. Opening our doors in the morning. You're living at 123 Main Street. I'm living at 125 Main Street, and say, "Good morning, Rick. Good morning, Tim. How you doing? Yeah, blah blah blah. I voted for Trump, and I voted for Biden. Okay, well, whatever. But we still got to take out the trash and mow our lawns. That's the America that's true. And those people who are coming into America, the migrants that are coming into America, however they're coming, they're not coming for Ecuador. They're not coming for Venezuela. They're coming here for the American dream. And yes, the American dream has been kind of sort of tainted by progressives, but our founders stepped outside of their nastiness, outside of their reprobacity. Okay, they stepped outside of their badness and said, we need to be better. We're people that have this, and we're going to have a constitution, and we're going to have a society that overcomes even our horrible natures. That is why the 1st, 2nd, 4th, 14th, those amendments, the amendments are amazing things. If you read the Constitution and then read the amendments, it's an amazing thing of what our founders is. That's why I kind of have a problem with 1619, but not too much, because 1619 is true. But then so is the fact that our founders were greater men than have probably ever walked political life in history, to say, hey, you may have to overthrow us one day, so we're not going to take away your weapon. Those are the kind of things that we have to have conversations about when we talk about political things.
Yeah, it's an interesting take on it, though. I view that weapon thing a little differently, as being part of a well-regulated militia, but we could argue that all day. I appreciate the call. I got to move along. But thanks so much. I appreciate the conversation, Tim. Thanks so much.
Bye.
I like the fact that he got some shots in there on progressives as well. I don't necessarily agree, but there's shots there. Let's go to Gary in Philadelphia on line 3. Who do we got? Well, okay. Well, thanks for that. Let's go to Kurt on line 3. Kurt, how are we doing today?
Thanks for taking my call. The reason I called is I wanted to talk about college tuition, and I'll give you a little bit of my story. Had my parents paid for my tuition, my room and board, my meal plan, and my books back in the mid to late 90s at Kent State University, they would have been paying $8,000 a year, which sounds like a dream today compared to what I looked it up to see what it actually costs today for the same thing that I got, that my parents were giving me,
right,
or trying to give me. $25,000 a year for the same thing for a state-run university in Ohio. But what I'm getting at is it really didn't cost my parents $8,000 because, as I told your screener, I was born back in the 70s with congenital cataracts. The doctor was high on dope when he delivered me, used forceps. I had black and blue eyes. It developed cataracts because my eyes were not fully developed at the time, because obviously infants don't have fully developed eyes. I had to have the cataracts removed the hard way because laser surgery would not be perfected for another 10 years. As a result, I was basically sentenced to being legally blind for the rest of my life. It sucked at first when you think about it, but you grow up, you learn to live with it because you don't know any different. As a result, my parents found Bureau of Services for the Visually Impaired in Stark County, Ohio, because we were living in Canton. I had to sit down with a caseworker. We had to come up with a long-term plan of success, which means, what do you want to do with your life? How do you plan to be a success? Blah, blah, blah. And the way they were going to pay for it, and I thought this was kind of generous, which I think it's still pretty generous, is they said I had to maintain at least a 2.0 GPA. I kept a 3.0 just to be safe. They paid for the tuition,
Yeah.
the room and board, the books, the meal plan, all that stuff. I even got a computer out of it. But what I'm getting at is the day I graduated was the day I got hired into the job that I'm in 21 years later. So what I'm getting at, it's kind of like with the GI Bill after World War II, where, the people invested in people to go out and get an education and try and get a job where you could pay taxes. And as a result, for every dollar put into these people being invested in to go get those educations, we got $7 back. I'm telling you, if I were to invest $1 and someone told me I was going to get a $7 return on my investment, I'm doing that every day of the week.
No, and that's an excellent point. This is an investment in people. And look, in a second, I was going to talk about, my path to this point. And that's an excellent point, the investment point. I appreciate it, Kurt. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Now, let me move along. Because here's the thing. And this is where, Kurt makes an incredibly important point. We're investing in the future. My generation, I'm solidly Generation X. We were told that the only pathway into the middle class was going to be, hey, we had to go to college. And for that, our generation is probably we held the largest debt balance, a smaller percentage of us, but the largest number. Whereas, the younger generation, much more of them are in debt. I decided not to take on debt. I decided to go get a union job, and look, I went back to college in my 30s and got a degree and a master's and all that stuff. But I paid for that out of pocket because I had the option of getting that job that really made me a good living. For too many, that's not there. So college is the option. So there's just so much here. Let's go to David in Milwaukee on line 3. David, how are we doing today?
Good. First-time caller, actually, on your show.
Good. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Yes. So really quickly, one thing I don't know if it's been discussed yet, but if you look at the endowments that private colleges have, Harvard actually has the largest endowment in the entire planet. They have roughly $52 billion in endowment. Harvard, like $41 billion, and Princeton, and some of these other schools. The point is this: we're always told that you have to go to a four-year college, and so parents, I personally went to the University of Minnesota. The advantage that I had, though, that I would like to see more states do, which you don't see too often, Wisconsin and Minnesota have a reciprocity between the two states where you pay in-state tuition. You're not paying out-of-state tuition. So if I go to Minnesota now, back when I was going, it was kind of goofy. So they changed it a few years ago recently, because I was paying in-state Wisconsin tuition in Minnesota, which was actually cheaper than a Minnesota student. So Minnesota said, the heck with that. We'll still do in-state, but you're going to pay in-state whatever state you're going to reside in. Minnesota also actually has reciprocity with a couple other states.
Yeah, Pennsylvania does the same thing.
What's that?
Pennsylvania does the same thing with a number of surrounding states.
Okay.
There's a reciprocity agreement.
I do think there should be more of that going on, personally, because obviously when you're paying out of state, you really get hit quite a bit, and you're going to have to take out a huge amount of money to go for being an out-of-state person. So that's one thing. Number two, if you look at, and I hate to say this, I hate to bring this up, but I'm a huge Badger fan. I admit it, even though I went to Minnesota. I look at what the coaches are making, like the football coach, Paul Chris. He just got a $1 million raise. He's making over $5 million in change for being the head coach for the football team. And then you got to throw out his assistants. Huge amount of money, big business. Basketball coach, he's making, Mr. Guard, I think, is like about $3.7 million. So roughly between just the basketball coach and the head coach for the football team, you're talking $9 million for two people. And so I have a real problem that schools in general, both public and private, especially the elite private schools, are just gouging parents. And so we have to look at it from the standpoint, okay, what's going on here? Why is this the case? People are willing to pay these exorbitant prices. And yes, I believe we need to pay the investment going forward in the future. But there has to be some sort of accountability and say, hey, you know what? This is not right. Because,
I agree with you. I agree with
yeah.
you, David. Yeah, but the reality is
Yep.
that's the second part of this, I think. And if you've heard the show before, I've talked about this. My hesitancy on this debt forgiveness has always been tied to what are you going to do for the next generation, for the next group of people
Exactly.
who have to take out these loans and have to pursue things. And the argument that I'm making is that we need to return to a tax base and a tax code that invests in higher education, that invests in our country in ways that my grandparents' generation did. And as I said a minute ago, we used to have much higher tax rates. The top marginal tax rate in 52 was 92%, and the corporate tax rate was well over 50%. And over the years, we have cut that down to where we are now, where the corporate rates now 21%, the effective rates down in the 8.9% range.
Right.
We have
Right.
created the largest billionaire class in history, David, and that massive redistribution of wealth has taken the form of saddling people with massive loans. That's my problem with all this.
Well, the thing is this. The only thing I will say is this. So when you're talking about the tax period for many years ago when it was much higher, the United States was really the only country, for the most part, that was able to produce anything, because Europe was decimated, obviously, after the Second World War. China certainly wasn't much of anything.
Yeah, but David, the rest of the world
was,
had higher tax rates as well. This fetish
I get that.
This fetish that we've had,
is,
driven by multinational corporations and the Reagan movement, the neoliberal movement, that's been to the idea of we're going to save free enterprise by destroying the commons, and they've done a great job of it.
But keep in mind, I was going to just bring up really quickly with the endowment, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no.
So the tax cuts that were passed a few years ago, people forget that there was an excise tax of 1.4% on endowments, because what we're talking about, because they're essentially, they're just sitting and growing huge amounts of money, and the parents are not seeing, and the students are not seeing the benefits of that, and they keep raising the tuition. And so what I would suggest is this, and they were screaming bloody murder,
15
those schools,
seconds.
when that got passed. And they have been lobbying this past year to get this with the forgiveness of student loans. All that's going to do is turn around, and they're just going to hike it up for the next group of people to make up.
Appreciate it, David. I got to take a break right here. I appreciate the call and the thoughts. I'm going to take a quick break right back after this. Remember, if you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day IWW leader Frank Little was buried in Butte, Montana. Little had been lynched on August 1st by police agents thought to be working for the despised Anaconda Copper Company. He had arrived in town to help organize 14,000 striking copper miners. Devastated by the deaths of 168 miners in the June fire at Granite Mountain and Spectacular Mines, mine workers formed the Metal Mine Workers Union and walked off the job. Frank Little had previously worked as a hard rock miner and organizer for the Western Federation of Miners. He also took part in the free speech campaigns on the West Coast. Little was involved in early drives to industrially organize oil workers and lumberjacks. He voiced his opposition to the First World War and sought to stop workers from enlisting. When Little arrived in Butte in July, he worked to build strike support, picket lines, and spread the strike to other trades across the city. Early on August 1st, 6 masked men broke into the boarding house where he was staying. He was beaten and taken from his room. His assailants tied him to the bumper of their car and dragged him through the granite streets of Butte to the Milwaukee Bridge, where he was hanged. An ominous note was pinned to his bullet-ridden body with the words that read, "Others take notice, first and last warning." It included the numbers 3, 7, and 77, as well as the initials of other union organizers in the area. As many as 10,000 marched in his funeral procession. Days after his lynching, martial law was declared. Labor radicals were rounded up and charged with espionage. The miners' strike and union were crushed. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Let's all gather round the campfire, buckaroos, and let old Cactus Jim here tell you about some of today's hardy, hard-working cowboys. Yes, those manly men who live free-spirited, yippee-ki-yi-yo cowboy lives out in the rustic ranch country of the Rocky Mountain West. Oh, wait, that was a century ago. The cowboys who are now humming Home on the Range across Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming are multimillionaire and billionaire corporate titans and celebrities like Rupert Murdoch, Bill Gates, and Bruce Willis. They don't really live there nor mix with the locals, nor do they actually ranch their spectacular 300,000-acre spreads, since they don't know how. So they hire real ranching outfits to bring in some cattle, sheep, and other ranching accoutrements. Then they fly in on private jets occasionally and strut around like John Wayne. They are, in a word, pathetic. But they surely are land barons, spending up to $200 million each for their vast spreads. Indeed, these dilettantes rule the availability of ranch land and scenic wilderness, pricing out people who really want to ranch and locking out families who want to experience some of nature's most majestic rivers and mountains. 15 years ago, the biggest private landowners held 27 million acres. Now they've grabbed 42 million acres for themselves. Well, say apologists for wealth concentration, they bought the land with their money, so it's fair and square. But hold on, Slick. They don't come here just for the views, hunting, and exclusivity. Their ranches get generous land subsidies. Plus, states like Wyoming provide no-tax hideaways for their wealth. This is Jim Hightower saying, so even though you and I are shut out of these gated land baronies, at least we can take pride in knowing that it's our tax dollars that help the rich buy them and lock the gates. There. Doesn't that make you feel better?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, I was looking at it going, what happened to the Forward Party? Remember the Forward Party? I was going, Andrew Yang and company, they've got to have something on the whole debt forgiveness thing. Got to have something on the student debt thing. I mean, after all, Andrew Yang's the UBI guy. He's the guy who says we should have universal basic income. So you would think that they would want to weigh in on this, and nope, not so much. In fact, their only tweet today was how to fix a system that's been corrupted by the mainstream parties and the people who prop them up. And they're simply asking whether you support term limits, nonpartisan primaries, ranked choice voting, or campaign finance reform. And yeah, campaign finance reform I'm all in favor of, but I don't know how this plays to the other thing. Very interesting. Very interesting. And here to share some thoughts on, well, this and the others top stories of the day, I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. Sarah is a reporter over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
I missed you. How are you guys?
We are fabulous. Look, I'm looking at this going, Biden's wrapping up the victories, wrapping up the getting stuff done, and not saying much, although today, give him credit, the Twitter he's been lighting it up.
Yeah, that's been really fun. The Republicans kind of had a little bit of a meltdown yesterday and into today as well, where they just really don't like it whenever everyday Americans get money. They want all of the money to be given to corporations and as Bernie would say, the millionaires and billionaires. So the fact that Joe Biden is giving student loan assistance to people who earn under $125,000 a year, I think it is. That's just like, Republicans are like, oh no, we can't have that. No, 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 no. So it's just been fighting with them, especially those who took PPP money.
Exactly. That's where I started
today.
With.
Pay it back.
I'm going, wait a second. How can you be against debt forgiveness when you took massive loans and didn't pay them? And how can you be a party that comes out and says, if you take out a loan, you pay it back, period, when you support Donald Trump? How is that possible?
6 bankruptcies for 5 companies. That means one of his companies filed for bankruptcy twice. And, depending on what happens in New York right now with Alan Weisselberg, we may have a 7th bankruptcy. So we'll have to see.
No, we're in an interesting moment. But, as I said yesterday, maybe we play a little political word game and take out the word student and worker and replace it with corporation and CEO. And then maybe the Republicans would come along.
Educational CEOs or something like that.
Now, what do you say to the argument?
Vice presidents of nerding.
Yeah, what do you say to the argument that this is a bailout to the universities?
I think that's absurd because the idea is that your student loans did not necessarily come from the university. A majority of them came from the federal government's programs. Maybe some of them came from your alumni association, which again isn't the university. That's not the administration. That's people like me who contribute $25 to the alumni association every once in a while. So, and a lot of what folks are paying back ends up being interest and fees. Like I have a friend of mine who started with a little over $50,000 in student loans. By the end of it, she's going to end up paying $79,000 for her education.
Yeah.
And
no, see, this is where my position from the beginning was. Right from the very start when this came out, I said, look, all we do is we buy up all the loans and you have them pay it back at 1% interest or whatever the administrative cost is, because there is that hey, you took it out, you got to pay it back. And that's fine. We don't pay massive interest and fees and all of that stuff, because I started seeing, people going, look, I took out, $50,000 and now I owe $300,000, 10 years down the road. And you go, how is that smart? How is that sane? How is it fair? And it's not.
A lot of the loans too end up being predatory lending practices where if you get a government loan, then Congress determined that the interest rate is going to be, I think somewhere, it was less than 4%, was like 3 point something. In 2006, Congress signed a bill that it would drop the interest rate, at least because you ended up with people who had housing loans that were less than student loans in the interest rate. And so Congress actually had to do something about it. I unfortunately missed the cutoff for that and locked in my rate at 7.8. But
wow. So let me ask you this, does this benefit you?
No, I actually, so I lived with my parents for
and yet you're
years.
still in favor of it?
Oh, hell yeah.
So stop. You are so un-American. How can you be for something that doesn't help you? Because the narrative I keep hearing, Sarah, is that this is the only people who are for this are people who benefit from it.
I know, right? And I also feed stray cats and open the door for people who are behind me. I think the most important thing that we can do to help each other out is to help each other out. And that is the one thing that I think Republicans are really not known for, is they don't really want to open the door for the people behind them. It's something that I remember Michelle Obama talking about, how important it is to help each other out, and be good leaders and good stewards of our country for other people who come behind us. And so, I mean, that's a major reason that I don't think anybody should have to deal with what I went through.
Wow.
Nobody should have to live with their parents. That's the other thing. Nobody should ever.
No, and nobody's parents should have to live with their adult children. No parent should have to live with their adult children, because they got things they want to do too. So this is a win-win-win-win-win. For everybody should be happy in this. And what I found most interesting is today, especially today, as I'm looking at the responses from people, especially on Twitter, because people have their little bios, the number of so-called Christians who are dead set against this, and yet for years they've been saying the Lord's Prayer. That right in there is about debt and forgive and debtors, and it just seems kind of, well, did they actually know what they're saying?
But that's the thing about a lot of these folks is that they get their Christianity from, some mega pastor who's charging them to come to church instead of reading the actual text. Because, if you actually read the Bible, especially the part that's in red, like all of the stuff that Jesus said is usually in red text. I think people who pay attention to that stuff, typically you end up being like a more relaxed and groovy person.
Relaxed and groovy. All right. that's there you go.
I'm just saying, relaxed and groovy, good.
Relaxed and
Republicans,
groovy.
relaxed and groovy, they're like, no. You can't have that.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Sarah Burris, reporter at Raw Story. Make sure you check out the work she does there at rawstory.com. I want to move along from this and get into some of the other top stories of the day. Evidently, Truth Social in a little bit of financial trouble as the web host, evidently they owe $1.6 million to the web host, which I got to tell you, I actually, I predicted months ago, I'm still waiting for Devin Nunes's press release that he's suing Donald Trump for not being paid, because it's coming, because they're going belly up. But how about these folks? Should they have to pay this debt to this company, or should they be able to file bankruptcy?
So the interesting thing about this company is that I'm pretty sure that Trump had a Chinese investor who gave him over $1 billion for this specific media company. So my question is, if you can't pay your own web host, what the hell happened to your money? Like, where did that $1 billion go to? Because it's been less than a year and you've blown through $1 billion. Are you kidding me? Like, there's something shady going on here.
He's charging really high golf fees.
Clearly, if you wanna post on Truth Social, that's one thing. But if you wanna post a picture with Trump on Truth Social, that'll get you a price tag of like $100,000.
Yeah, well, that's the candlelight dinner. Let's be straight. That's the candlelight dinner. But speaking of Truth Social, today the former president went on his failing social media site and went on a rant of how he did nothing wrong, how he's as innocent can be, how the radical left was basically torturing him. But hey, we don't pay enough attention to that Hunter Biden. A nice sleight of hand, a little bit of distraction, gonna work.
I'm not surprised that he started saying. Not saying, but those emails, like rip that one out, lock her up, start doing that one again. If it's not one thing, it's another. He's going to figure out some way to blame everybody else for whatever his problem is. My favorite thing that he posted today was all caps. He put Presidential Records Act. And what's hilarious about it is that's one of the acts that he's violated. And so typically you don't have a criminal like running through the streets with a bloody knife screaming, I murdered people, but clearly that's the new legal strategy coming out of the crack team over at Mar-a-Lago.
No. Well, wait a second. There is no crack team. He can't find a lawyer, right?
I know. He's got
himself.
He's got 2 lawyers, 2 women, Christina Bobb and Lindsay something, and then some dude from I can't remember where, but the Lindsay woman is the one who today had a really hard time on using the legal server Pacer, where she couldn't update her email address because apparently the filing for the case, where whenever Trump went to complain about, I don't like this, I don't like that they're going through all my stuff, I want to get a special master so that they don't have to, they can't look through my stuff. He went to this other judge about it, and the lawyer who filed that kept trying to change her email address because it was like apparently a Gmail address, and now she wants it to be an Outlook email, and that's a whole thing. So finally, I think the clerk's office had to post some sort of thing saying, "We're sorry, the lawyer's just trying to update her email," and she can't figure it out.
It's a stall. It's got to be a stall tactic, or look, she's trying to get AOL back. I don't know, but my favorite
It's so
part.
sad.
My favorite part was him claiming that the FBI and the DOJ are leaking like never seen before. And I'm going, wait a second. I remember them leaking like a sieve during the 4 years when you were in there. Maybe you weren't paying attention, or maybe it was you leaking the stuff. I don't know.
The thing is, if they were really leaking, we would have had the affidavit by now without any redactions. And we're like sitting here waiting. I was hoping we'd get it by 6, but clearly not. So I'm going to be up at midnight, like refreshing just to be sure that they haven't updated it. But by noon tomorrow, we'll have the affidavit, and that's something that I think under the Trump administration, if it was somebody else, he would have leaked that by now. There would have been tons of leaks from this investigation. Yeah. That's the thing that's different, I think, about Merrick Garland is, he is going by the book, and that's why it's taking forever.
Now, the weird thing is the polling on the number of people thinking that Trump should face criminal charges actually going up. 48% in the latest YouGov poll think that Trump should face criminal charges. Only 35% think he shouldn't. 17% not sure. That's a pretty big uncertain area that could, as more information continues to come out, especially if we find out exactly what these documents were and maybe some other ideas on what he was going to do with it. That 17 could swing.
But in the new NPR Ipsos poll, I think it was 57% said that they want to see more evidence and they want this case to move forward. So people, this is kind of like what happened with January 6th, where the more you show them, the more they want to see. And I think that that's what's going to happen with the Mar-a-Lago documents and the more classified stuff we find out. I think there was a poll that was taken before the story about him having nuclear-related stuff. And even, I think, 30% of his own people said that they would not support him if he had access to classified nuclear information and took it back with him to Mar-a-Lago. So he's going to have to do some work trying to get to his own people again.
No, that's it. And this victim card can only go so far. That's the interesting part.
At some point he's going to stop losing, he's going to start losing fundraising dough too. Like there's only so many emails you can send out. I think they sent out 20 emails in one day on last Friday. I counted, and it was just like, dude, what is going on here?
Now, the thing that I find interesting is there are a lot of people who are saying now this information that's coming out about Trump isn't coming from Democrats. It's all coming from Republicans who are trying to purge the party of this weight around their neck. Because, look, I'm waiting. I'm really hoping he announces his presidential run any day now.
I think some people are trying to sweep him under a rug. But at the same time, the courts are bringing in a bunch of folks to ask questions, not just in this case, but in the Fulton County case and in New York. And all of those people are they want to talk to Lindsey Graham. They want to talk to Mark Meadows. The judge that Trump went before to try and get a special master was his own appointee. The FBI director is the guy he appointed. All of these people are Republicans. And I wrote a story today about what's his name, Representative Stewart in Utah and McLeod in Texas, who both said, man, if he's got classified information, there's a real problem here. That's what they said last week. 6 days later, it's like crickets. They're not saying a word. So it'll be interesting to see if there's a bipartisan consensus around the idea that maybe somebody shouldn't jack a whole bunch of classified stuff and take it with them to the golf club.
Yeah, 700 pages. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't an oops. I took the wrong folder. I'm sorry. That wasn't that.
And there's now a chain of custody around these documents because Trump's own people, his White House counsel and deputy White House counsel already spoke to the FBI about it and said, wasn't us. We tried to get him to give all that stuff back, and he wouldn't do it.
Hello, bus. Donald Trump. Trump, bus. You just got pitched under. I want to get your thoughts on Jared Kushner's new book, evidently claiming that he gave it to Donald to read, 500 pages plus, I guess, with no pictures, that according to Jared Kushner, Trump is reading.
There is no way in hell he's actually reading that book. I'm sure he probably assigned that book to one of his people and told him to like highlight the good parts or give him like a bulleted list of something. One of the things that's funny too is one of the many emails that Trump has been sending out. One came from Kushner promoting his book, and then one also came from Ivanka talking about how I'm so proud of my husband for, writing this book. It's so amazing.
Yeah.
And I don't know why she just became a drag queen, but the voice that I'm doing for Ivanka. I thought her thing was that she was going to try and get out of Trump world. I thought they both were. So what are they both doing emails on,
cashing
Trump's
in.
campaign list?
Cashing in.
Like what is that about?
But
yeah, it's about making some of the Benjamins.
If I'm them, I'm ducking and covering on the $2 billion the Saudis gave them, which I'm not hearing enough about. I want deeper investigation into the $2 billion gift that Kushner got from the Saudis.
Yeah, I think so too. That needs to be. We need to have a conversation about that.
But Hunter Biden's laptop. Hunter Biden's laptop.
Right. And what's her name? Ashley Biden's diary, and those people got arrested today. The people that were trying to sell Ashley Biden's diary. So, it really doesn't pay to crime and implicate other people when you've got some fingers pointing back at yourself.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope. And finally, I want to end on a good note. Evidently, rapey forehead. Matt Gaetz, evidently the reports are the feds aren't done with him yet. Thoughts on rapey forehead?
I'm not surprised. There was really no conclusion about, the stuff that he did and how much his buddy, basically turned him over to the feds. There was a lot of stuff that his lawyer kept trying to say, we're still talking to the feds, we're still talking to the feds. And so they couldn't sentence his buddy, the tax collector from
Joel Greenberg.
Yes, Joel Greenberg. I kept wanting to say Josh. But Joel, finally is finished giving them everything that they need, and so they could do his sentencing. But we haven't heard anything since then. It hasn't been that long, frankly, and I'm sure they're probably really busy. The feds are really busy in Palm Beach with some other stuff. But I'd be really curious to see at what point, Mr. Forehead is, might actually have some criming he's got to figure out himself.
Yeah, there's a lot for the Department of Justice to work through, a lot for the FBI to work through, and while I'm not always a big fan of the FBI,
he looks exactly like Butthead from Beavis and Butthead.
Of course,
he really does. The way he coiffs his hair, I swear it's the exact same look.
Okay, so there you go. He said, now we know. Sarah, I appreciate the time as always. Fun stuff. If you want to check out the work that Sarah does over at rawstory.com, that's the website. Sarah, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Have a great weekend.
You as well. Our good friend Sarah Burris. Again, remember, check out her work, rawstory.com. That's where you go. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1819. That was the day that Alan Pinkerton was born in Glasgow, Scotland. His father was a policeman who died while Alan was a boy. This left the family in poverty. As a young man, he became involved in the Chartism movement. This reform movement hoped to expand the political rights of the working class in Great Britain. Alan had to flee his homeland to avoid arrest because of his involvement. This led him to Chicago. It is a great historic irony that Alan Pinkerton came to the United States because of his involvement in a working class cause. Today, Pinkertons are often considered some of the greatest armed foes against unionism in U.S. labor history. In Chicago, Pinkerton became involved in law enforcement and then formed his own detective agency. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency made its name working against railway thefts, but it became most notorious for opposing the labor movement. Pinkerton spies infiltrated labor meetings for company owners, worked as hired guns to stop union organizing, and protected strikebreakers. Alan Pinkerton died in 1884 and passed the agency on to his sons. During the 1890s, there were more Pinkertons and reserves than the standing Army of the United States. One of the most famous battles between Pinkertons and workers occurred at the 1892 strike against Carnegie Steel in Homestead, Pennsylvania. There, 7 workers and 2 Pinkertons were killed. The event inspired a song by William W. Delaney. The lyrics included the lines, quote, "God help them tonight in their hour of affliction, praying for him who they'll ne'er see again. Hear the poor orphans tell their sad story. Father was killed by a Pinkerton man." For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So good day for workers today as Chipotle workers in Lansing, Michigan voted to become the first unionized Chipotle in the United States. Congrats to them. Also, workers at REI in Berkeley, they voted overwhelmingly to become the second unionized REI in the country. And, well, the Starbucks machine keeps rolling as workers there in Pittsburgh at the Allison Park Starbucks voted unanimously to join and form a union in their location. Good on them. I think the Starbucks thing, I think they're like maybe 250 to 270 places that have organized. Good on them. Also, shout out to the folks in New Jersey. Their department of their OSHA department, who went after this contractor, who created a dangerous work environment, caused a fatality, and was warned that, hey, this retaining wall could collapse. You need to shore it up. They didn't, and they've been charged criminally. Now this is important because this rarely happens. Normally, it's just a fine and a slap on the wrist. And as I've said a million times, if I ever wanted to kill somebody, I would just give them a job and then, well, do something like this. This is a moment where charged, facing criminal charges for the death of a worker there, for willfully violating OSHA regulations. This is rare. And I've been saying for a very long time that we need to make these things happen more often. It's more than just a fine. Now, a death on the job like this is, I think the maximum fine is $500,000, but no one rarely ever gets that. Normally it's a slap on the wrist, a promise to never do it again, and it's washed under the rug. It's about time we start holding people accountable. Now, me personally, again, I look at this and these workers should have had a union to protect them, as every worker should, so that someone doesn't end up having to die to create safe work environments. So, good on the state of New Jersey, good on them for doing this. But ultimately, for me, it comes back down to giving workers the voice to not put themselves in dangerous positions. And educating them to make sure that they don't get put in dangerous positions, which our friends in the building trades do a very good job of. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you can find yours, you'll find ours.
Small green plants line the bed of what used to be a frontier lake between Switzerland and France. It's existed for 12,000 years, but now it's relegated to just a small stream.
More than half of Europe mired in worst drought in centuries. Climate change action is way more popular than Americans realize. Plus,
a country famed for its oil resources, committed to going to sustainable mobility.
Saudi Arabia pushes to become a global electric vehicle leader.
Really?
Yes.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
There is no climate crisis. It is a hoax, and fossil fuels are a wonderful thing.
It is 2022, and that is Virginia Congressman Bob Good. Hey, Virginia voters, it's 2022. Can you please vote that guy the hell out of office? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, from heat and drought in the U.S. to heat and drought in China. Now we're back to heat and drought in Europe.
Yes, unfortunately, more than half of Europe is mired in drought. According to a new report from the European Commission, 64% of the continent is in severe or exceptional drought, the highest category, and it is the worst drought in at least 500 years, and likely more. The combination of record heat and drought has triggered water shortages across Europe and is contributing to a widespread increase in fire danger across the EU. Drought, heat, and fires are all worsened by man-made climate change.
Yep, they are.
Here in the U.S., new projections from NOAA hold a warning for coastal communities that are seeing flooding on sunny days at high tide.
You mean like Florida?
Yes.
Then I'm sure they'll ignore it.
NOAA's latest outlook predicts that sunny day flooding, which today occurs on average nationally about once every 2 months or so at any given spot, could hit as frequently as every other day by 2050. That's within the lifetime of a traditional 30-year mortgage originating today. New Jersey is crafting new regulations to restrict development in coastal flood zones based on future climate projections, not past flood data.
Good.
By 2150, sea levels in Jersey are projected to be 5 to 19 feet higher than today.
Don't tell Florida.
A disturbing new study finds that living near natural gas fracking wells increases the risk of childhood leukemia. Researchers at Yale School of Public Health found that children in Pennsylvania who grew up roughly within a mile of a fracking well are twice as likely as other young people to develop juvenile leukemia. But some good news. New modeling shows that Democrats' newly enacted landmark climate bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, will not only save consumers money and lower energy costs, but will also deliver massive benefits and cost savings for public health. By reducing fossil fuel air pollution, the law will prevent up to 4,500 premature deaths every year by 2030 and hundreds of thousands of asthma attacks, with the biggest gains in communities of color that are disproportionately burdened by industrial pollution.
Well, that is good news.
In other news, a new survey finds that climate action is far more popular than people in the U.S. realize.
Is it?
2/3 of Americans support government climate action, but everyone is underestimating how much other people support climate policies, incorrectly believing that their neighbors don't support action. The researchers found this false perception occurs across all states and demographic groups. Even Democrats don't know that climate policy is very popular.
And why don't Democrats even know that?
The researchers at Boston College partially link it to decades of right-wing media demonizing climate policy.
Go figure.
And it matters, because when people assume something isn't popular, they don't talk about it, leading to what the researchers called, quote, a spiral of silence that helps obscure the deep, widespread support for climate protection measures across the board.
Of course, they don't talk about it. They think others don't agree with them, and they're afraid to speak up about it.
Finally, big moves in electric vehicles. Saudi Arabia has launched a major initiative to become a big player in the global electric vehicle sector, investing billions to develop a domestic minerals mining industry and an EV manufacturing and processing supply chain for batteries and cars. Bloomberg News reports that the petro-state hopes other countries will swap out their dependence on Saudi oil for dependence on Saudi battery materials, a sector that China currently dominates.
Chalk me up as dubious. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report. Are you
tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.